Good evening and welcome to San Francisco Opera Guild Preview Lectures. My name is Celeste Camarena and I serve as Education Program Manager. Tonight, we are diving head first into a funny, fast-paced masterpiece, Il Barbiere di Siviglia, The Barber of Seville, written by Gioachino Rossini. To give you a quick snapshot of who we are, San Francisco Opera Guild was founded back in 1939. We are an independent nonprofit, but we work hand in hand with San Francisco Opera to make this beautiful art form accessible to everyone. Tonight's talk, it's part of our Opera Previews program. This is a completely free lecture series where we connect you to world-class professors and artists. Our goal is simple: to give you a fun insider perspective before you see the magic happen on the main stage. At San Francisco Opera Guild, we are deeply committed to bringing the fresh, creative, and vibrant access to arts education all over the Bay Area. You may know us already through our popular school programs like Opera Together, Voices for Social Justice, or Sing a Story. We offer an amazing lineup for students from kindergarten all the way to high school to spark their creativity and connect them to the transformative power of art. In these programs, our incredible teaching artists guide students through the creative process to build confidence and find their unique voices, sparking the joy of music and storytelling. If you want to see how we are nurturing the new generation of artists, composers, singers, storytellers, please visit our website, sfoperaguild.com. Now, let's get right to the main event. Tonight, we have the absolute privilege of hearing from an extraordinary expert who is going to bring the Barber of Seville to life for us. Please send us your digital hearts and give a wonderful welcome to our host and Guild board member, Lauren Erickson, and our guest lecturer, the brilliant Dr. Laura Stanfield Prichard.
Hi, everyone. I have the pleasure of introducing Laura Prichard. She has been working with the San Francisco Opera and the San Francisco Symphony since 1995. She taught graduate courses for 10 years at the San Francisco Conservatory and Cal State Hayward, and served as the assistant head of the UC Berkeley Music Library during the design phase of its brand new building. Her graduate degrees are from UIUC, Emory, and Yale. She serves as a dramaturg for new works for the New York Phil and teaches 1 to 2 courses per year at Harvard, Tufts, Brandeis, and Bunker Hill Community College in downtown Boston. You can catch her popular online world music and classical masterworks classes through the OLLI programs at Dominican in Marin and through the adult OLLI programs at Brandeis and Tufts. She and her husband commute 3,000 miles to sing under Jenny Wong in the SF Symphony Chorus, and she served as the assistant chorus conductor for that group from 1995 to 2005, preparing the group for concerts with NTT. I think it's safe to say that we're in for a very knowledgeable educational class tonight. I am very excited to have you, Laura. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Lauren, and it's wonderful to be invited back by the Guild to speak about this hilarious, fantastic work and a special production that sets it in place that is mentioned in the title, actually Seville, Spain, rather than a general world of potential 18th century opera.
Well, I'm
So
excited for you to show us some of these kind of things that maybe we wouldn't think about when we're watching this production. So
it's
I
a
thought
it's
maybe,
a very multicultural work, not just simple
yep,
Italian opera, but touches many countries and many times.
yeah, I think it's really, really interesting. And just for everyone here on the Zoom, we got a sneak peek of some of Laura's slides when we were doing our prep, and I was just so excited because I feel like this is an angle that a lot of people might not hear about or know about. And so I think even if you've seen this opera a million times, you are still going to learn a lot tonight. And I think that's really exciting. So I was wondering if we could just spend 10, 15 seconds just taking a look at our marketing poster for this production. If we could make that as big as possible, it still looks quite small to all of us here. That would be great. But I think always looking at what SF Opera is doing in their posters helps us get a sneak peek as to what we can possibly expect, either within the production or just the show itself. So I thought maybe we just look at it together and say, what do you see? What are some things that maybe the audience might not know to take a look at? I mean, I see a comb, I see scissors. Scissors, yep, excellent. So obviously we have a barber that tells us a little bit something, but what else do you see, Laura, that maybe the audience might not be catching up on? Ooh, red, white, and blue. Yes. Okay. Ooh, a French story. Yeah, very interesting. Obviously, we see two lovers kissing, so I think there's going to be some of that. Ah, we see no Figaro. Yes, that's true. Tisk tisk. Where is he? Excellent. Okay. Well, Laura, I'm going to pass it off to you and can't wait to learn about everything Barber of Seville. So take it away.
Great. Well, thank you and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to start by, I will share my screen, and I have checked share sound and optimize for video sharing because I will be showing you not only just Rossini's Barber of Seville, but telling you a little bit about some of the different ethnic roots of music in Seville that will show up in this special San Francisco Opera presentation, and a little bit of the Rabbit of Seville. So I wanted to start by pointing out that although our performance dates are May 28th through June 21st, on June 5th, there will be a special live stream event. And on Wednesday, June 17th, that performance will be a special Barber of Seville encounter, and there will be a lot of wonderful, unique activities in the lobbies and special food that night, and a lot of people come in costume on June 17th as well. Now, I wanted to begin with a version of some of the music from Act 1 as heard in a special film that was created by Warner Brothers in 1949 called The Rabbit of Seville. It's a three-part video. I'll just play the first 2 minutes of it, which is mostly a collage of music of Carl Stalling, who was the main composer and arranger and sometimes conductor for Warner Brothers in the 40s and 50s. If you hear Warner Brothers cartoon character running up or down the stairs, that's Carl Stalling. And then he adapted music from Act 1 for the beginning of this short 7-minute film called The Rabbit of Seville. And Mel Blanc, who is the voice of Bugs, then sings words set to music Figaro will sing. You'll hear a little bit of music from some of Rossini's arias and a little bit of the opening overture. The overture is featured in the middle of this film, which I won't play right now, and that overture was not originally written for the Barber of Seville opera. It was written for two earlier operas, and basically Rossini would write an overture and he would try it with an opera. If the opera wasn't successful, he'd write a new opera, but keep the old overture. So we call this now the overture to the Barber of Seville, but it is the overture to three of Rossini's early operas. This is music written by a little bit of it, teenage Rossini, and the opera itself is from his early 20s. So if you think of a college or graduate student you know, This is music of that age of a composer. So let's have about 2 minutes of Warner Brothers presentation. This is filmed from 1949.
Welcome to my shop. Let me cut your mop. Let me shave your crop. Daintily, daintily. Hey, you. Don't look so perplexed. Why must you be vexed? Can't you see you're next? Yes, you're next. You're so next. How about a nice close shave? Teach your whiskers to behave. Lots of lather, lots of soap. Please hold still, don't be a dope. Now we're ready for the scraping. There's no use to try escaping. Yell and scream and rant and rave. It's no use, you need a shave.
Oh, ouch, ouch, oh, ouch, oh, ouch.
There, you're nice and clean. Although your face looks like it might have gone through a machine.
Great, so that's a little introduction to some themes that you would hear in Act 1. This is a comic opera, or in Italian, an opera buffa, in 3 acts. Now, if you go to an opera and you're told this is an opera buffa, you expect there to be some stock characters. And by that I mean characters that have been used for several centuries and show up in plays in Europe, in traveling street theater, and in early operas. And this is an opera from the teens of the 19th century, but it was a story that was published in the 70s of the 1700s. So this year we're celebrating a lot of America 250 stuff, and I think the stereotype of that is that we're studying Puritans and the Declaration of Independence. But 250 years ago, a French playwright known as Beaumarchais was writing his 3 Figaro plays, and this is the first of those, The Barber of Seville. It is in 3 acts, and it's lighter and more quirky than Mozart's masterpiece, The Marriage of Figaro, which will be featured in our season next year. Rossini's classic opera buffa revolves around stock characters, and those are taken from Commedia dell'arte, which is a Renaissance Italian form of drama with stock characters. And the characters would, kind of like in an American melodrama, they tended to play the same role and the same function, and the plots would shift slightly. Commedia dell'arte was developed from comic entertainment by medieval musicians, and those could be minstrels in France, troubadours and trouvères in southern France, minnesingers in Germany, and then Italian-speaking singers as well. Commedia dell'arte comes early in the 16th century in Italy, and the groups evolved into more elaborate traveling companies. So these plays evolved and changed. One of the main characters from Commedia dell'arte is a kind of wily servant character named Harlequin or Arlecchino, and he is the younger brother of a character named Brigella. And Brigella, the older brother of Harlequin, the sort of stereotypical puppet character, could be a master of many trades depending on the commedia dell'arte that's being presented. So sometimes he has a small dagger, as you see in this Renaissance portrait over on the left. Sometimes he is a barber, and he is shaving a kind of like a suspect or a potential troublemaker very, very violently, and that's meant to be very funny for the audience. And that is the character that is adapted by the French playwright Beaumarchais in the late 1700s into the character of Figaro. He is a barber. He is a jack of all trades. He can play a variety of plucked string instruments, the typical guitar. He can play Muslim-style lutes. He can dance. He can fix things. And really that character is an autobiographical portrait of Beaumarchais himself. And I'll talk about him a little bit later. This is our Figaro. He looks a lot like the statue on the right. A little bit of Spanish attire, and his home is Seville in southern Spain. The other characters that you find that come from Commedia dell'arte that show up in these three Figaro plays are Harlequin and Brigella are adapted, the sort of wily servants. There are old men characters, and one of those is called Il Dottore, or Dr. Bartolo, seen there on the right. There's a character in Commedia called Pantalone, who's a sort of bumbling artist, sometimes a music teacher. And so in this opera, we have a character on the left named Don Basilio, a music teacher who likes to gossip a lot and is sometimes later in the opera absent, and people will show up and say, "I am his substitute," and they'll be admitted to the house. There are also characters named Lindoro. Linda, you may know, is the Spanish word for beautiful. So it's a name for a young boy, basically a beautiful young boy, Lindoro, and Rosina, or Rosie. And Lindoro is actually the disguise of a count. Here's a picture from our current production. We have our Figaro on the right, and we have the Dottore, the doctor, on the left. Here's another picture from our own production, and we have Rosina on the left, and she is a very witty and wily character. She's a wealthy young woman that is being raised as the ward of an older man who hopes to marry her, and the help of the barber is enlisted to free her for this arrangement and to win her for Lindoro's pure heart, and only later will she then be told, if she loves Lindoro for the right reasons, that Lindoro is actually a wealthy nobleman as well, and he is sometimes called Alma Viva. Alma is the Latin word for soul, so an old soul or a long-living soul, and he is a count. So I wanted to continue on by telling you the story of the piece. There are a lot of different ways to set this, and ours is more traditional and set in Seville. So you'll see flamenco dancing, for example, in our production. This is an example of a very modern production, and you see here Figaro on the left, a Rosina dressed in a very modern, fashionable way in the middle, and a Count Almaviva dressed as a young student, Lindoro, courting Rosina. So I want to let you hear a little bit of the story, and for that I'm going to defer to a young woman who I've worked with for years, who recently has moved to the United States from Paris. She herself is a soprano, wonderful opera singer. She has sung Micaela with the Washington National Opera, and she recently, just a year and a half ago, is the regional finalist for the Metropolitan Opera La Font competition. She's also sung Fiordaligi and several Mozart roles. She has a wonderful series that she started 10 years ago when she was as young as Rossini was when he was writing this opera. that was done through Opera Vision, where she draws pictures of the character and she sings some excerpts from the opera as she tells a little bit of the story. So her name is Mia, M-I-A, Mandino, M-A-N-D-I-N-E-A-U. I think this is maybe the most charming way of telling what's going on with the characters, because she's just the right age, the age of most of these young characters in Barber of Seville.
Are you moving your head a bit? All of these excerpts are from Rossini's masterpiece, Il Barbiere di Siviglia, The Barber of Seville, which originally is a French play by Beaumarchais. The story is set in Seville in the 18th century, as usual. This is the Count Almaviva, who is disguised as a poor student named Lindoro. The opera starts with a beautiful serenade scene in which Almaviva hopes to make the young Rosina fall in love with him. That's why he's disguised as a poor guy, because he wants her to fall in love for his personality and not his richness. Rosina is this fierce teenage girl who is a bit sequestered by her tutor, Dr. Bartolo. Her tutor is planning on marrying her to himself. That's why he's keeping her inside the house, so that no one can really take a look to this incestuous, weird situation. This sequestration situation is making Almaviva's plan a bit difficult. But don't worry, because Almaviva will get the help of the star of the show, Figaro! Figaro, 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 Figaro! Yes, sir! Figaro is the barber of Seville, although he barely cuts any beard. Figaro offers Almaviva to help him get his girl. Here is the plan. Almaviva, disguised as Lindoro, will on top of that disguise himself as a drunk soldier and try to barge into the house of Bartolo and Rosina. Did you realize that about operas? That they always have to make it more complicated? It was not enough that the guy was already disguised. On top of that, he has to be a disguised man in disguise, like... Anyway, Rosina was very charmed by Lindoro's serenade, and she sees him as a way out of her house and her incestuous situation. So, she writes him a love letter in a fabulous aria, Una voce poco fa, and she will then give that letter to Figaro so that he could pass it on to Lindoro. Qui nel cor, na 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 na. Si, Lindoro. Moments later, Almaviva / Lindoro, now disguised as a drunk soldier, barges into the house of Bartolo and Rosina and acts all drunk and demands hospitality. While Bartolo is calling the cops, Almaviva manages to sneak in a letter to Rosina. When the cops finally arrive, Bartolo is like, arrest this man! And Almaviva discreetly reveals his identity to one of the cops. So, they leave him alone. Bartolo is like shocked. He's like... Act 2 starts with another disguise of Almaviva, already disguised as Lindoro. This time, he dressed up as a music teacher, and he enters Bartolo's house telling him that Rosina's music teacher, Basilio, is sick and that he's here to replace him. Seeing that Bartolo is not really buying his act and trusting him, he gives him the love letter that Rosina sent to Lindoro in the previous act, and he makes Bartolo believe that this Lindoro is actually a servant from the evil Count Almaviva who's trying to take Rosina from him. Even though Bartolo is happy to learn this information, he is still a bit suspicious. So he decides to stay in the room while the substitute teacher is giving her music lesson to Rosina. But then, Figaro, superhero, arrives to shave Bartolo. He finally does his job. Yay! He manages to distract Bartolo enough so that Almaviva can give the flirtiest music lesson ever to Rosina. Bartolo finally hears the two lovers kind of flirting, and so he stops everything, gets super mad, and throws all the men out of the house. Bartolo decides that enough is enough and he's going to marry Rosina this evening. He asks his friend, the actual music teacher, Basilio, to go and fetch the notary because they will marry each other at midnight. Rosina arrives and finally agrees to marry her tutor when he tells her about Lindoro and how he is a servant from Almaviva and he's been using her since the beginning of the opera. It is the night and the wedding is about to happen. Figaro and Almaviva climb to Rosina's room. When Rosina sees Lindoro / Almaviva, she's very mad against him. And so he tells her that he is the count and explains to her why he wanted to disguise himself as a student and that he's been loving her since the beginning. And she's so pleasantly surprised that, of course, she loves him back. And right at this moment, Basilio and the notary arrive to Rosina's room for the wedding with Bartolo. Almaviva bribes the notary in order to switch the groom. Notary is marrying Almaviva to Rosina, and Basilio and Figaro are the two mandatory witnesses. So, by the time Bartolo arrives in the room in order to marry his ward and arrest the intruders, the lady is already married to the count. Whoop-de-doo! And Almaviva chooses this fabulous moment to reveal his identity to everyone present.
Il conte d'Almaviva, io sono.
What a nice, happy ending.
Now she goes on to describe a little bit more of the musical detail, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the history of the production and exactly what we are doing with it that makes it special. It's a very typical, complicated story. It's very much like other plays of the late 1700s, very farcical, a lot of disguises and a lot of witty switching and surprising of characters. In San Francisco, this is one of our most popular operas. We have a long history of presenting Italian opera, and in fact, the beginning of the company that dates back to the days of Gaetano Merola was originally a company mostly interested in presenting Italian language opera. And he had conducted in Europe and conducted in New York and then came to San Francisco, and some of our very first performances included excerpts of Rossini, and some of them were done outside down at Stanford, and then eventually our own beautiful opera house was built. So we have done this every single year that is on this list. The 2020 outside, some people during COVID watched our production on film, sitting in their cars in a drive-in movie theater setting, and that's when we really started to do more of these online talks and online presentations in order to reach a wider variety and a greater diversity of audience members. Now, I say it's one of our most popular shows. It's also one of Rossini's most popular pieces. And for example, the great Italian opera composer Giuseppe Verdi, when he was 85, he was asked, what is the best opera? He said, well, there are different categories of opera, but his favorite style, the most complicated and witty style, is opera buffa. And he said, Verdi, his favorite opera buffa, the best one ever written, was this work from the 18 teens, Rossini's Barber of Seville, and he said it has an abundance of ideas, comic verve, it has truth of declamation, and he called it the most beautiful opera buffa in existence. So as Mia Mandino told you, it begins at the house of a doctor, Bartolo, who's keeping his niece, Rosina, confined. And she has a big inheritance coming to her. He is her guardian. He does intend to get both the beautiful girl and her extensive inheritance by getting her to marry him. And so I wanted to mention a couple of famous early Rosinas. She went by Geltruda Righetti, sang at the premiere in Rome, and she is one of the ones that, for example, in the famous aria Una voce poco fa, took sometimes Rossini's fairly simple quarter notes and started adding triplets to them. And she did that very consistently. And that style was picked up by Josephine Fodor. And Rossini, when he published the work widely, he incorporated some of Geltruda Righetti's decorations in his score. So if you buy the piano vocal score, the music for Rosina, for example, is about 85% the Rossini, and the melody line is about 15% additions from Geltruda and Josephine Fodor. Harriet Sontag was another famous Rosina when the work was done in Paris. And when works traveled from the Italian-speaking part of Europe north, very often they were translated, and some of the recitative singing was taken out and changed to speech, or vice versa. And so there are a lot of different versions of this work that are created in the 18 teens and 20s. Another thing that happened, especially with the character of Rosina, is that she would sing so well and she would ornament the melody so beautifully that she would be asked to sing encores. And instead of just repeating the whole song, it was common for the Rosina to have in her trunk, in her case of costumes and things backstage, other songs that she enjoyed singing. So sometimes when there were demands for encores, she would sing a piece by Arditi called Il Bacio, The Kiss. Sometimes a bolero would be sung, a Spanish song from Verdi's opera I Vespri Siciliani, a sort of Sicilian Spanish combination song. Sometimes the encore would be music by Meyerbeer, a composer of Jewish background, French composer who's very successful. The Shadow Song showed up, interpolated into this aria. Another favorite is from Rossini's own opera, La Donna del Lago, The Lady of the Lake. His Tanti Affetti would be added to this piece. And even sometimes Henry Bishop's Home Sweet Home, be it ever so humble, there's no place like home. That would be interpolated in English right into it. And in Russian settings, there's a Nightingale aria by Alyabyev that would get added into it. So it wouldn't just be a night only of Rossini. Now, Mia Mandino mentioned in Act 1 a famous opera aria for the character Rosina, who often is dressed in pink like a rose, and it begins with a little introduction. And so I want to let you hear some of this work and how it can be ornamented by a master of this bel canto style, Cecilia Bartoli. So here's, I don't have the English translation put on the video. Instead, I have the score going by of Rossini's published version from the 1820s, about 6 years after the opera was premiered. So the first thing she'll say is una voce poco fa, a little voice from the past echoes in my heart. And then she'll sing Lindoro, this costumed, masked, hidden count. Lindoro, or the pretty boy, will be mine. And so she says, I swear, vincerò, I'll be victorious. And then very quickly, she sort of gives you the backstory. My guardian may refuse. I'll use my wits. He'll be calmed, and I'll be content. Then she'll say Lindoro's name again with a much more expansive musical phrase and says, I swear I'll be victorious. And she says, vincerò again. So let's listen to the first part of this aria, and the main thing I want you to notice is that at no place in the printed score does it say how loud to sing or any sense of expression marks. There are no accents, there's very little sort of staccato or even legato marks. And instead, how singers were very expressive with this style was that they could take time, and that makes it very difficult to conduct. You really need a master in the orchestra pit to start and stop the orchestra and follow the singer's speed and interpretation exactly, sometimes pausing in a surprising way for expressive effect. And also, especially in this Cecilia Bartoli rendition, she doesn't ever sing anything exactly the same way twice. Once she sung something the first time, even though it's printed exactly the same, she will start to ornament it. So here's the first third of this aria. Okay, and then now we are in the middle section of the aria. She says, docile, I'm docile, I'm respectful. Several times she will say how obedient she is, but she will say that ironically. Obbediente, she will say in Italian. Gentile, loving. Gentle and loving. Then a few times she will say, I let myself be ruled, I let myself be guided. And then she will move on to the last part of the aria, and she will pause and dramatically say but in Italian, ma, M-A. But if they find my weak spot, I'll become a viper. And notice when you look at the vocal line, the way that it's printed, the vipera will be full of 16th notes, and it will move along and really look like a snake or a viper on the page. And then she will say, I will play 100 tricks. So look for the word cento for the 100 before I yield, and then she'll repeat some of this second and third parts of the aria. But again, when you're listening to Cecilia Bartoli, you're listening both for expressive singing, slowing down, speeding up, and you're listening for her, just like the original sopranos, to recompose the music and to add to Rossini's printed score. So, for example, you have this this little line that you are about to hear, and 100 different ways I will trick. Sometimes she sings that, and sometimes she sings and sometimes she sings scales. And sometimes she will sing all the way up to a high B. And she'll sing a dominant seventh chord. So you can follow the score and notice how she is recomposing the piece. You can listen to the subtle ebb and flows of it, or just enjoy her wonderful, rich tone and acting. Every Rosina sings this differently. So I'm playing now the middle and the end of the Act 1 aria, Una voce poco fa, the character of Rosina, to give you a sense of how much the singers will be adding to and playing with the material provided by Rossini. Let me skip to where we were. probably noticed right there at the end, there were two choices of music. Originally, the plain quarter notes are Rossini's first draft. Just those simple quarter notes with the stems down, and then the little decorations and the rising up, the very, very high, up to the high B flat. She sings "Oh si" at the end. That is an example of something added by those early sopranos, and Rossini provides both options in his version of the aria. Now, our production is unusual, and it is specific to the original location of the play, which is Seville, Spain. So our dancers will not come out and do typical ballet or minuet from the 1770s, from the time of the first French Figaro play. They will instead try to bring to life Seville. And so we have adaptations of flamenco dances. There are a lot of Spanish roots of classical music. If you took a basic 1-year survey of classical music, required music history class, you may never have really mentioned Spain much at all. It tends to be in general focused on great masterworks of French, German, and Italian music, with the other countries presented as sort of outside of the sphere of the main development of the most important masterworks. But I think that's totally wrong, because especially in the late 1700s and the early 1800s, it was a new thing for conductors and composers to begin to travel around and to get information from people in new places they went about where they should travel next and what they should listen to. So if you, for example, attended a salon of a powerful woman in Paris in the early 1800s, you would not just hear French music by French composers, you would hear visitors from faraway lands, and you would be encouraged by people to travel widely and to enrich your artistic palette. In Spain, especially in central and southern Spain, for the Renaissance and Baroque and classical periods in music, there was Roma influence, Muslim influence, African influence, and Jewish influence on classical singing. That predates the development of flamenco, which now Spain is a very kind of far-right country, and very many politicians there mention that flamenco is the pure Spanish form. And again, I think that's really ironic, because it's a very diverse form with many different elements that have brought it to its modern state. Early bolero song forms were brought to Paris and sung and guitars played by Manuel Garcia, who became one of Rossini's favorite tenors. He, for example, sang Otello in Rossini's Otello. Russian composers traveled to Paris and then were told to travel on to Spain. And so there's a huge flowering of Russian orchestral music with Spanish guitar influencing it and Spanish melody. Almost every Russian composer you can think of in the Romantic period, Tchaikovsky, Rimsky-Korsakov, Balakirev, many Russian composers incorporate Spanish music, and especially bolero and different kinds of early flamenco tunes. Then, that last bullet point, there are many plays that are set in exotic Seville, Spain. And you know characters from Seville. Don Juan, also called Don Giovanni. Mozart has an opera using the Italian form of his name. Byron wrote a beautiful verse kind of novel called Don Juan, and that is the nobleman in Seville, Spain, who wants to sleep with every woman and experience every beauty in all of Europe. Kind of a bad guy who usually is undone by his bad behavior. So a cautionary tale. Beaumarchais, the French playwright, wrote 3 plays featuring the character of Figaro in some way, and they are very autobiographical. Beaumarchais himself spent time in Spain. And then Prosper Mérimée went to Spain and was an historian and a person who compiled words for word books and early dictionaries. For example, the first Roma French dictionary. And he read the newspapers of the time and found all kinds of exciting murder stories and adapted those into his short stories that became the novel Carmen, which ends with a whole chapter of Roma words and descriptions of Romani dance and song. So there's a lot of interesting characters that are originally from Seville, Spain. I mentioned Manuel Garcia came from Spain and brought a lot of music to Paris and really made that connection in the early Romantic period between what was going on in Rossini's early career, the opera singers, and all of his folk music. Manuel Garcia there on the left is shown in his role as Otello from Verdi's opera. And he had two daughters who became opera singers. Pauline Garcia married a man named Viardot, and that's her salon in Paris on the right. Such an elaborate room that it had a full organ in it. And she is the one who hosted Russian composers and authors and encouraged people to mix her own Spanish heritage with contemporary French music, Italian opera, and some of those salons are really the places where a lot of these pieces were thought up. And the singers created new projects. For example, the Garcia family is one of the first families to bring Rossini's music and Italian opera to America. They actually came to New York. One of the people that they brought with them who ended up settling in New York and New Jersey was Mozart's librettist, Lorenzo da Ponte. And he is the librettist whose words you will hear next season when San Francisco Opera does the second Figaro play called The Marriage of Figaro in Mozart's own version. And that librettist starts out in Venice, but he ends up in New York City as Columbia University's first professor of Italian. So all of this is very relevant to us as Americans and as lovers of opera, coming from diverse parts of Europe and combining into an important form. Now, I mentioned Roma and Muslim roots, so I wanted to be specific about that. When I say Roma influence, I'm talking about the dancing, especially the upper arm and the flexible wrist movements that survive in flamenco, the use of wooden castanets. When I talk about Muslim influence, I'm talking mainly about the use of long-necked plucked stringed instruments, lutes, gradually developing into the guitar. So when you hear Lindoro serenade Rosina, you will see him playing a long-necked lute. And that word lute comes from the Arabic word for long-necked plucked instrument, which is oud. You see the Arabic there. Usually translated or transliterated O-U-D. And Arabic is a language that uses el and la at the beginning of words to mean the something. So if you think of European languages, you know that use el and la and le and le to mean the word the. That is an influence from Arabic on European languages. Older European languages like Latin don't have that little particle. So the word oud changes to lud, the oud, the plucked string instrument, and that's what we get our word lute from. The image you see on the top of the page is a Muslim musician and a Christian musician performing together in public. That's an image from before 1492 when the Spanish Inquisition started to try to eject Roma, Muslim people, and Jewish people. But throughout Spain's history, those people survived and they were very resilient and they continued to inform dance and music, especially folk music, and the kind of dance called the dance flamenco, or the dance of fire. The first time that we have documentation of that is right around the same time as these original plays. 1780, a Spaniard named Sebastiano Carrezo writes about the bolero, how to do the dance, what melodies are appropriate, and that is a publication that Rossini had a copy of. He was born just a little bit later, and he was interested in Spanish music. And that dance style, el baile flamenco, the flamenco dance, has a lot of Indian dance elements because it turns out after now 100 years of, well, actually, no, it's been 200 years, thanks to the writer of Carmen, research on the Roma, their language and their music, we now think that the Roma come to Europe from Rajasthan, from the far western, the left side of India. And so a lot of those dance movements may come from the Indian subcontinent. So it's a really, really rich form of dance. You find statues all over Seville and southern Spain of Roma dancers. In Spanish, gitano, or a little Spanish dancer, la gitanilla. This is a sculpture of a scene from a short story by Miguel de Cervantes, a Renaissance Spanish writer. And all those dates below are just examples of the presence, the continued presence, even though they were attempted to be expelled, the continued presence of Roma musicians and Roma dancers. And all those dates are times in Toledo and Segovia and Granada when the kings of Spain said, I still see this influence in the streets and we need to tamp down on this influence. And so it shows that they kept being resilient, and the dance kept being performed in public with castanets, with hand drums, with clapping, and with stomping of the feet. Okay, so let's see a little bit of authentic flamenco in southern Spain. This is a short scene from the very end of a beautiful film from 1993 called Lacho Drome. It includes 3 songs that are mostly in Spanish with a few Roma words, and the very last scene in this movie, Lacho Drome, which is mostly in the Roma language, features this scale going down. A Phrygian scale is E to E on the piano, basically the white keys. And so you'll hear the young singer start high on an E and descend to an E. And this is another thing that Rossini knew about and incorporated into his Spanish-sounding music. Here's just a little bit of that film, Lacho Drome. This is a scene from Seville where you see flamenco done by a community outside on the street. This is a film that I recommend. It's got 24 different scenes and they're all available on YouTube. This is the final scene, it starts in Rajasthan in India, and without spoken words, it brings you through a series of musical and dance scenes, gradually west, 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 until you reach Andalusia in Spain. So it gives you a sense of the kinds of sounds that Rossini knew about and was trying to reference, the kinds of local color that our production is incorporating visually. So let's hear a little bit of Figaro himself. We've been talking about him. He appears a little bit later in Act 1, and he introduces himself by basically saying he's a master of all things. And so this is his introduction. Ah, me, what a crowd, what a fury, one at a time. Figaro's here, Figaro's there, up, down, faster, faster, make way for the factotum, the man that can do everything. Bravissimo Figaro, the luckiest of men. And then the aria continues, and he makes a list of every job that had ever been held by Beaumarchais, the playwright who invented Figaro. So here's a little bit of Dmitri Hvoroslavsky singing Figaro in a concert setting. I just love the way that he acts this, and he embodies the confidence of a young man who thinks that he can do anything.
Presto, battega, che l'erba presto. bel piacere, che bel piacere per un barbiere di qualità, di qualità. Ah, bravo Figaro, bravissimo, bravo. La 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 la. Fortunatissimo per verità, bravo. La 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 la. Fortunatissimo per verità, e fortunatissimo per verità. La 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 la. Pronto per tutto l'anno del giorno, sembri di torre in giro sta, fino al cucagno per barbiere, vita più nobile non si dà. La 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 la. Raso di petti le lanci di forbici, il mio comando tutto qui sta. Raso di petti le lanci di forbici, il mio comando tutto qui sta. Bella risorsa, poi del mestiere, con la donnetta, con il cavaliere, con la donnetta, la 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 la, e con il cavaliere, tra la 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 la.
So in that last line, you heard Rossini moving from the high E down to the low E through that same sort of white note Phrygian scale and decorating it in a minor way, very, very much like we just heard in the flamenco performance. Now, I mentioned that some of these characters are not just based in Commedia dell'arte, but inspired by real people. This is the face of the playwright. Again, if you're thinking, how does this relate to America 250? He is living exactly during the time of the lead up to the American Revolution. He is a person that was well known to Americans who traveled to France to solicit help, and he himself was a big help to the American cause leading up to and during the American Revolution. His name was Pierre Auguste Caron, and is the same family name as the Parisian dancer and actress Leslie Caron, who appeared in many Hollywood musicals. Later took the title Beaumarchais, and he was not the first Pierre Auguste Caron. The first was his father, and the father was the royal watchmaker and many, many jobs for King Louis XV. And so this young man went to the French court, and he was the junior watchmaker and the junior barber, and he became the harp and singing teacher to the princesses of France, and he introduced himself as Caron Jr. or Caron Fils, F-I-L-S. Like the son of Caron. And he said it was very frustrating. Everyone knew his father and respected him, so his entire youth, they would say, "What is your name, sir?" And he would say, Caron, Fils Caron, Fils Caron, Fils Caron, Fils Caron. And I really think that is very likely where his idea of the name Figaro came from, his own name, son of Caron, or Caron Jr. He wrote 3 Figaro plays. The one that is based on the opera you will be hearing this season, The Barber of Seville, and there's Figaro dressed, I don't know if you noticed, in revolutionary red, just like Beaumarchais and like the young Mozart would love to dress after he visited Paris and met Beaumarchais. Then the second play that he wrote is called The Marriage of Figaro. So the Figaro character is a little older, and he is in love with Susanna, and so that's his own love story. And the Count Almaviva and Rosina are married, and they are presented as the Count and Countess in that play. Mozart's opera is the most famous version of that. And then there's a third play called La Mère Coupable, which means the mother culpable, or the guilty mother. And the Countess, Rosina, has grown up, and she has a young son, and she's being blackmailed because the blackmailer knows that her son is not Count Almaviva's son, but is actually the son of a very young man, a character from the second play named Cherubino. But Cherubino has gone off to war to be a soldier and has been killed, and she's being blackmailed. So the barber must once again come with his wife Susanna, and they save Rosina, they save the Countess. So if you're the type of person that has funds and you would like to commission an opera, commission a great American or modern composer to set this third Figaro play. So we will have Rossini's beloved version, Mozart's beloved version, and La Mère Coupable set as well. The character of Almaviva is thought to be based on King Louis XV. That's Louis XV, his formal portrait on the right, and on the left is the original Count Almaviva when he reveals himself not to be Lindoro, the young man, but rather the Count. And you can see how similar they are in dress and in style. The opera premiered in Rome in 1816 in a hall that's very similar in style, in size, and in sound to our own home in San Francisco. I think it's wonderful. Even the coloring is the same. It's called the Theater Argentina, and it had a lot of boxes on the side. The boxes did allow patrons to close the curtains and engage in adult behavior and then snap the curtains open when there was something they were interested in to see, and they didn't have the best views of the stage, whereas our hall does not have those old-fashioned sideways facing boxes and rather has everyone with their attention, I think, where it should be, right on the stage. Rossini was very successful even as a young man as an opera composer, and he's mainly from the city of Pesaro, Pesaro, in Italy, and there's a conservatory there and a festival of his works. So I've made a playlist on YouTube which you can get to for free, and it includes many different versions of every one of his major, more than 24 operas, some in Italian, some in French, and several of the obscure ones are done by that festival in Pesaro. He is really world famous. On the left here, you can see a Bulgarian stamp. Bulgaria was trying to establish who are their cultural heroes. They wanted to put them on stamps, and Rossini, even though he never went to Bulgaria, was voted one of the favorite musicians at that time. And so you see the Barber of Seville, the score behind him, the young Rossini, and you see Lindoro holding a guitar and the name Figaro in the corner. And then you see on the right, the small country of San Marino has a Rossini Barber of Seville stamp, and you actually have several different scenes involving all those costumes and attempts. Okay, then I want to show you, this is a video from about 6 years ago. This is the last video I'll be showing you, and it features one of our singers. And so we will have a split cast, and this is one of our Count Almavivas on the right, Levi Sekapane, and he is a South African tenor of great renown. Has made his La Scala debut, and here's a little bit of now kind of an old recording from his late 20s, and he's now 35. So here's a little bit from the second act of The Barber of Seville, and this will be the final video I show, and then I'll wrap up.
Ma vedi il mio destino, quel soldato, per quanto abbia cercato, niun lo conosce in tutto il reggimento. Io dubito, cospetto, che dubitar? Scommetto che dal conte Almaviva è stato qui spedito quel signor ad esplorarne la rosina e le fore. Nemmeno in casa propria sicuri si può stare, ma io mi batte, ehi, vieni là, battono, non sentite, in casa io son, non v'è timore, aprite. Mille grazie, non si incomodi. Gioia e pace per obbligato, in verità. Pace grazie, non si incomodi.
Gioia e pace per 1000 anni.
Obbligato, in verità, questo voto non mi ignora.
Ma sul comandato voi,
Non ravviso, non ricordo.
manca per questo ballone.
Ma quel voto,
Un nuovo travestimento.
non capisco chi sarà.
Pizza me sarà, sì, sì, pizza me sarà. Gioia e pace, gioia.
Ho capito, oh ciel che noia.
Gioia e pace, ben di cuore.
Basta, 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 per pietà.
Gioia,
Gioia,
pace,
pace, ho capito, oh ciel che noia.
ben di cuore.
Pace, gioia, basta, 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 per pietà. Ma che perfido destino, ma che barbara giornata,
Sotto fortunato.
ma che perfido destino.
Ah, mio bene, so distante, ah, di libertà, ma devo pensare che stare,
Ma che barbara giornata.
Gioia,
Che noia,
pace,
ma basta,
gioia,
basta, basta, per pietà.
ma devo pensare che stare,
So there's a lot of wonderful comedy in this, and Rossini was very well known for his patter songwriting, very, very quick writing. If you're a fan of Gilbert and Sullivan operettas later in the 1800s, very often they are making fun of bel canto opera scenes like these famous works by Rossini, similar bel canto pieces by Donizetti. If you're interested in reading more about this, here are a few things that I recommend. Stendhal, romantic French writer, knew Rossini personally when he retired at the age of 40 and never wrote an opera again, and really became an interesting benefactor to other artists and loved to have dinner parties. And he really had a whole second half of his life where he wrote letters and was influential in politics and statesmanship. So Stendhal writes about his memoirs of Rossini as a person. He writes that almost 10 years after this work. There's a wonderful Cambridge companion to Rossini with short articles about many different topics, both his comic operas and his serious works. Fantastic new-ish book by Hugh Thomas called Beaumarchais in Seville, about the period of Beaumarchais' life when he's exploring Spain and how involved he was with politics of the time, including how the plot was hatched that he, who was trilingual, would be sent as sort of a Figaro-like character with politicians to England, and he would pretend like he didn't speak English and he would spy for the French court in several different locations. So Beaumarchais in Seville is very, very interesting. Then there's a piece about the performers of these works, especially the women, and how much they contributed to the development of the form, although it's been typical in scholarship that we write books mainly about the male composers of the period. Hilary Porras, who's now the new head of the music department at Northeastern University in Boston. She's an opera expert and specialist on the female singers of the time. And so her book, Changing the Score, Arias, Prima Donnas, and the Authority of Performance, is a wonderful book. If you're interested in things like what opera arias did they have in their trunk, and how did pieces get sort of made into this interesting patchwork quilt with all these different influences, how much power did the women have in the creation of new works, and their continued performance. And then finally, there is a brand new critical edition of many works by Rossini with all kinds of great academic notes about exactly which version and who contributed exactly which note. And that's been edited by Phil Gossett. And there's a wonderful lecture when that new critical edition came out of the Barber of Seville, which discusses all the different early versions of the work. That's available online on YouTube. So I will have all of the videos that I played today, and a further 60 videos, including full-length versions of all of Rossini's major works, on YouTube. So you can take your phone and take a photo of that, or take a photo of the take a screenshot of the page, or you can write me an email at laura@prichard.net. Be happy to answer any of your questions. And we hope to see you either online, our streamed version at our special event, or one of the wonderful productions coming up. And you will see Figaro, 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 even though he is missing from this poster. And I hope that you really enjoy this new, interesting, very Spanish interpretation of a French play set in Spain. Thank you very much. And let's see, let me stop sharing. And we'll see if there are any questions in the chat, or anybody else would like to write a question in the chat. Celeste, are there questions that people have posed to you that we could answer?
Well, it seems that we have a couple of questions.
Okay.
I believe that some people think that it's better to post them privately because they don't want to interrupt the flow of the lecture. So it says here, Rosina was written for a low contralto, I believe, but sometimes is sung by high sopranos. How does pitch change the character, and is this traditional?
Yeah, so originally the part was just labeled soprano. The lowest note in the role is a G below middle C, and it's true that because of that, and where the middle of the arias lie, it's more commonly a role that's sung by mezzo-sopranos. But it does have a couple of high B flats in every one of her solo and duet sections, and increasingly more people singing it will ornament by going up to the B flat, and I've even heard some light high sopranos interpret it by going up to the D or the F in the B flat chord and singing sort of high Mozart soprano type notes. But it is a soprano role, but it is more traditionally done by someone with the darker, more sort of rich and chocolatey voice. I think Cecilia Bartoli gives a really idea of the modern preference for that slightly heavier voice. The people who were paid, the contracts that exist from the 18 teens and 20s, on their contract they're listed as soprano. And most of them went on to be listed later as not even soprano, but just prima donna, the first lady of the opera. And their contracts have things in them like, she will sing this many of this specific high note. And so she expects the composer to create songs for her that fulfill this requirement. Very much like a modern Broadway singer, for example, Idina Menzel, when they were developing Wicked. She met with Stephen Schwartz, and Stephen Schwartz said, "What's your best note?" And she went, "Wah!" and sang a bunch of notes, and he said, "That is the key that Elphaba will sing in, and that is her high note," and they really worked that out together. And if you're interested in that, Hilary Porras's book about Porriss, her book about the divas of the time, and how the voices and the personalities shape the roles, I think that would be a great bet for you. You would really enjoy that.
Well, that's wonderful. We have another one. It says here, what specific articulation techniques or breathing techniques singers need to survive the arias, especially largo alfa totum?
Yeah, so when I learned this, I learned it in college, and I was told this is a piece you should sing maybe until you're about 35 or 40. It's meant to be a younger character. That character of Rosina that becomes the Countess, that's a role that Mozart writes more for a voice of a character that's someone in their 30s and 40s. And then La Mère Coupable, she's in her late 40s, early 50s. So it's a youthful role. Usually when you learn it at about 1/3 or 1/4 speed. And then you learn the basic form of it, and then you discuss with your teacher. The teacher models for you different ways to interpret, and there are several existing books that people study in graduate school now that give advice from singing teachers of the early 1800s about what is appropriate to add. And so you'll find a simple line of quarter notes, and then above it, here is how this was sung according to various different divas, and you can kind of choose from that. And then, of course, now, since the 1990s, we have the internet, and so you can listen and absorb that way as well. In general, the idea of fioratura, like singing coloratura as fast and fiery and high and low as possible with a lot of power, that comes not so much from the female singers as it comes from the male castrato altos and the male castrato sopranos, who were more commonly used throughout Europe to sing loud, fiery roles of gods and angels, powerful generals, and even sorceresses in the 16 and 1700s. And Mozart, who lives right during this period, Mozart, who's born in 1756, and listens to Beaumarchais' play with songs by the concertmaster of the orchestra at the time when he's 20, and then goes on to write his own version of The Marriage of Figaro, the second Beaumarchais play. Mozart worked during his youth with an equal number of sopranos who were female singers and sopranos who were male castratos from Italy. His father was employed at the court of Salzburg, which was its own kind of city-state separate from the Austrian Empire, and they loved to invite up into church settings male castrato singers, and they were renowned for not only the loudness and the power of their voices, but their ability to ornament and sing these very fiery phrases. So you would start slow, then you would decide what ornamentation you're going to add, and they would gradually speed up. And I find that it's actually easier to sing fast once you're kind of comfortable with the notes. But I'm 56 now. I'm still a very useful symphony chorus singer in Boston and in San Francisco, but I would not any longer attempt this kind of coloratura as a solo role. Just as the amount of estrogen in your body evolves and as you age, the light staccato singing really does sort of leave your voice. Like the ability to do that very fast, light coloratura where you're bouncing around on the shortest notes, that seems something that is really the sound of a youthful voice. The other advice that my teacher gave me, just since you asked about technique, is figure out at any moment what is your highest note and only perform music in public that requires a few notes below that. Don't go in public and sing like if your highest note, my highest note used to be the F, the octave above the F on the top of the staff. And I could sing some of those Mozart arias that he wrote for his sisters-in-laws that had the high Fs and would write into their contracts, she can sing 7 high Fs a night. If high F is your highest note, don't perform arias in public with high Fs, maybe Cs or Ds. And if you're 56 years old and your best really great high note is the high B flat or the C, just a few notes above the staff, go ahead and keep singing Ode to Joy and Beethoven. I think we have like 62 high B flats in the Beethoven Ode to Joy, but don't try to force your voice up to that very highest possible note. There needs to be a sense of ease. And so you really have to check, as you're warming up, what can I do today? You might change the ornamentation every single performance that you do. And Cecilia Bartoli talks about, in that performance she said, I had a little bit of a sore throat that day, so I sung more of the lower register and I ornamented less when it was down there around middle C and the G below, and I really preferred that on that day, and only sung up to the high B flat 9 times instead of on a day I felt better, I might do 15 high B flats, that kind of thing. So you kind of think of your range as an instrument and work within it, and don't push that as a soloist.
And definitely that is something very to be aware now that we're coming to the opera house and see the choices the artists are taking.
It'll be
and
different
observe.
every night.
Yeah, that's wonderful, because then it's not a standard. We always get to see a new version, a fresh
Yes, and
version.
because it is double, the main roles are double cast. We have 2 Figaros and 2 Rosinas and 2 Counts, and I think even 2 Dr. Bartolos. I would say go twice. Whoever if you're going to see it online, that's a very convenient way to see it at home. But you could also then go and see the other version live. Somebody wrote me privately, could I mention those books again? So in the chat, I have put the playlist that I have of Rossini that has 60 videos. 40 of them are individual operas from start to finish with surtitles. And then I also put in there the names of the several different books that I recommended in the chat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And finally, it says here, apparently, I didn't know this, apparently the premiere was a famous failure. What exactly went wrong, and how did it become the masterpiece that is overnight, seems like?
So he's a young man when it premieres. 4 problems. 2 weeks before the premiere, the producer drops dead. Oh. So there is nobody solving problems and hiring people to replace any last thing or finding backstage props or any of that. Producer is gone. Then a black cat gets loose and runs around on the stage. And 2 of the singers were terrified that it would be bad luck. And so as the cat was on the stage 6 times during the opening night. And some people would scream in the middle of their singing and like turn away from the cat, and it would ruin the blocking. Then the cat ran under the feet of Dr. Bartolo, who tripped and fell and either broke his nose or he at least gave himself a really bad nosebleed. And so he had to sing Act 2 and 3 with a big kerchief over his face, which was getting redder and redder and redder. And the various characters are coming on stage and handing him a handkerchief, and his nose bleeding. There's nothing like a backup or a second cast available. If you were a member of an opera house company, you were expected to sing many operas a week for many, many weeks, sometimes months in a row, and you were the only, available baritone, that kind of thing. And then the 4th thing that happened was this Rossini opera, he knew that he should not call it the Barber of Seville because there were almost 40 other composers who had set this text in Italian as Il Barbiere di Siviglia, and there were about 20 French opera composers who had set parts of the story in French. And so he knew he was competing with all of those. And there was one Italian composer in particular named Paisiello, and Paisiello had rabid fans, and so they showed up at the premiere. They bought a bunch of seats, and they booed and they hissed and they yelled things like, "That's not funny," and "You're a bad actor," and they really kind of savaged the opening night production. But then they went away, and the production started to catch on, and especially the Rosina added many fantastic notes and wonderful choices of different interpolated encores. And eventually Paisiello passed away, so there was not that sense that the young upstart Gioachino Rossini was sort of not respecting his elders, and it really helped Rossini's career to take off. When it was done in France, it was translated into French, and the French version also was very, very successful. I've sung in a version, now it's been about 20 years ago, San Francisco version with text by Donald Pippin, where he translated it all into colloquial American English, and it's hilarious that way too. So we are lucky to have fantastic surtitles that are projected in the hall. And if you go to larger houses where there's a little bit more diverse audience, for example, at the Metropolitan Opera, the surtitles are actually in the backs of the seats right in front of you. You can press a button and you can see the surtitles in English or for some productions in Chinese and Spanish. And I hope that at some point in the future that kind of technology would be available to us because we have such a diverse audience. So many people in California speak Cantonese at home, speak Spanish at home, speak different languages from the Philippines at home. There are all kinds of different ways that we could reach out more and make this more accessible. It is the case, though, when you see this opera, when you hear a text, you will see the surtitles translating it, and San Francisco complies sort of with the standard set by the Met that if they start repeating the text many times, the screens will go blank. They won't keep the surtitle up there and keep flipping back through the text over and over. They figure you're an opera fan, you've got the basic meaning, now enjoy the musicality of it, the comedy available on the stage, the beautiful costumes, and don't think so much about staring at that surtitle screen with the English. Allow your eyes to, drift down to everyone else's work. And,
Wonderful.
so it's an interesting convention. It frustrates some people, but they're basically saying to you, we, the staff, think now you should stop looking at the surtitles and really watch the full production, appreciate the hundreds of hands that together made this fantastic work of art and a very special performance.
Thank you so much. And I guess finally, during the fall, we produce with one of our with one of our in-school education programs,
Yes.
we did opera together, The Barber of Seville, and we have around 500 students coming to the dress rehearsal. And I know they are going to watch this video. Is there something that you would like to tell to those students that made the tiny little show, the 50-minute version of the opera, and now are going to come and observe the main production?
To those students, I would say this is one of the great operas that really celebrates youth and the inventiveness of youth and the way that people are willing to try on different versions of themselves, different masks, different personalities. For example, you might have a friend that is known by one part of their name as a teenager, and then they go off to college, and instead of being William, now they are Bill, and then they become Liam, and you see those characters in transformation. You see a young Count Almaviva, and if you're interested in his story, then you can come back next year and see him grown up a little bit more and playing the role in the second play in Mozart's Marriage of Figaro. And so it's a great play. More of the characters, more of the minutes on stage are singing young voices in this than many, many other operas. And the elderly characters are really made fun of and are resorting more to conventions of that very ancient commedia dell'arte. So the older the character, sort of the older the stereotype, almost a Renaissance character. And the younger the character, the more it was very close to the real autobiographical life of the creators, the young Rossini and the young Beaumarchais. So
wonderful.
Hopefully they can relate
Thank you.
the story of love.
Thank you so much,
Sure.
Dr. Laura Prichard. This has been a wonderful preview lecture. We are so honored and grateful for your presentation, for your time. We really enjoy having you here. Hopefully you'll be with us next season. And
Yes.
now to finalize tonight, because I know we are all eager to hear what is coming up, I'd like to invite President of the Marine Chapter, our dearest Peggy Hill.
Well, thank you for joining us tonight. And that was a wonderful preview, and it's available online until June 21st. So if you have friends that you are going to go see this wonderful opera, you can remind them that they can still sign up by just Googling San Francisco Opera previews or preview San Francisco Opera. And it'll also, again, be live streamed, this opera. So you don't have, if in case you can't get to the Opera House, Friday, June 5th, 7:30, and you need to sign up for that through the San Francisco Opera itself. And just to make things a little complicated, our next preview, when we do a live version, will be of Elektra, and it'll be June 5th at 6 p.m. And that should be very interesting. But again, it'll be on for several weeks for the run of the opera after that. And be sure to sign up. And thank you again for joining us, and tell your friends about the preview, and we hope to see you next time for Elektra. Thank you so much, everybody. Bye-bye. Good night.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night.
Good night.